Thank you for joining us for another episode of Baker Hosts Ad Nauseam, a podcast series focusing on new and trending advertising issues with an emphasis on the FTC and the NAD. I'm Connor Corbett, your new host of Ad Nauseam, and you're listening to Baker Hosts. We are once again joined by Amy Mudge and Daniel Kaufman, two partners from Baker Hostetler's advertising, marketing, and digital media team. Together, they have decades of advertising experience and approach advertising issues from multiple perspectives. On today's special episode of Ad Nauseam, Amy and Daniel broadcast live from the Association of National Advertisers annual conference. They're joined by Phyllis Marcus, director of the National Advertising Division, for an interview at the ANA conference that took place on November 4th, 2025. Phyllis discusses current NAD cases and what's on the horizon for NAD. With that, welcome to Ad Nauseam, and let's turn it over to Amy, Daniel, and Phyllis.
Hello, and welcome to our third Ad Nauseam podcast episode brought to you live from the ANA main stage. Daniel Kaufman and I are going to help you set the table for the conference that's going to happen today, and hopefully to help you prepare to prioritize your marketing counseling based on what has happened.
Yeah, Amy, so much has happened in the last year. We've got a brand new director at the NAD. We're really excited to welcome Phyllis Marcus to Ad Nauseam. So at a high level, what can you tell us about NAD's priorities and your priorities as the incoming director that are of particular interest to this audience?
So as most of you in the room know, at NAD, we take our cases as they come. So when you're a challenger, you're filing a case with us against an advertiser, and we are the venue and the forum to help resolve that dispute. So my priorities are focused more on our monitoring cases, and we'll talk a bit about that a little bit later. But what I am noticing is what I'm calling a little bit of old and a little bit of new in terms of the cases that are coming before us. We are seeing a slight uptick in Made in the USA cases, especially given the economic and tariff posture. We're seeing some bread and butter pricing cases. Competitors competing on kind of the most fundamental attribute, which is price. And the NAD hasn't done that many of those cases. I suspect this is a result of a slightly shaky economy as well. We're seeing some new cases being filed by pharmaceutical companies against other pharmaceutical companies. That is somewhat new for the NAD. We're ready and we're taking them on, but a slightly new change in our docket. We're also seeing some cases in the B2B space. So companies that are marketing business creation services, for example, or financial services. So our cases kind of wax and wane in terms of what we see, but these are four categories I've noted.
All right, well, let's talk about the stick. Participants at NAD generally come to you and agree to participate. They generally agree with your recommendations and to abide by them, but sometimes they don't. And we have the referral to the FTC that is the age-old. But I know you're exploring some things going beyond that that might help give NAD some teeth. Can you talk about
again,
those?
Something old, something new. So we have our referrals at the federal enforcement level. And actually, the Federal Trade Commission is not the only recipient of our referrals. We may send a case over to the Food and Drug Administration, to the EPA, to the Securities and Exchange Commission. I mean, it really depends on the posture of the case. We also have formal arrangements with the platforms on whose the advertising has appeared. And so we can send a case over to the platforms. They will then review it through their own advertising codes and make an independent determination as to whether a particular ad violates their codes. But we are looking now at additional referral paths. And I think one of those referral paths is likely to state attorneys general, who I believe are open for business and ready to receive.
Yeah, the states are busy. But I know, Phyllis, earlier you mentioned pricing, and we saw recently a bread and butter pricing issue come out of the NAD involving smart scales and strike-through pricing. Do you expect to see more such challenges, perhaps from retailers involving sales, basket comparisons, things like that?
I actually do. I suspect we're going to see a wave of those kinds of claims and challenges. So stay tuned on that one.
Interesting. Okay, so talking about pricing, I want to get back to something off topic. Amy and I do spend a lot of our disposable income on concerts and theater, of course.
Too much,
Theaters as
yeah.
well. Best concert you ever attended?
Say somewhat recently, Billy Joel at Nats Park in Washington, D.C.
I'm going out of the 80s, anything Beyonce, Renaissance, Cowboy Carter, whatever she is next, I'm buying.
I'm going several decades. I saw Stevie Nicks in Vegas. I've seen her many times, but at the Vegas concert, she shook my hand. So that requires a response. Thank you. I've been blessed by Stevie.
Okay. Daniel will be at the booth afterwards if anyone wants to follow up on
Didn't wash the
that.
hand for a long time.
All right, what is the concert that you didn't attend that you have the most regrets over? And mine, going back to the 80s, David Bowie. I can't.
It's so hard to pick, but disparity here, Queen and the Carpenters. Like two groups I would love to have seen.
The Carpenters.
Oh my God, they're amazing.
Okay,
Oh.
all right. I mean, I have to go recent with my kids begging me, how can you get us to see Taylor Swift? I just dropped the ball.
She'll be back.
Okay.
Yes.
I feel like in said crystal ball, she'll
Okay,
be back.
good. Got another chance.
Okay, Phyllis. So the FTC and Commissioner Holyoke certainly focused a lot about protecting kids online. And we've seen several NAD monitoring cases this year looking at cosmetics claims that were targeting teens. What concerns do you have about how companies are marketing to younger audiences?
So earlier this year, actually, we brought a series of cases involving cosmetics, teens, and actually, in one instance, younger children. And this was the first crossover case between our sister unit, division called the Children's Advertising Review Unit. Many of you in the room know this fondly as KRU. And we brought cases involving the use of young children to sell products. They were filmed by their parents, and we dug in both to that technique and also to the products themselves as they were being marketed to kids and teens. And we looked at the scientific data to determine whether the efficacy statements and the safety statements were substantiated. So, I mean, we will look at particular target audiences and determine what their takeaway of an ad would be and whether the substantiation fits those claims. So in very specific categories like teens, we're going to take a very close look.
All right, it's here, AI. NAD added an entire lawyer whose focus is on AI, and you have brought a number of cases this year, largely focused on AI products and performance claims. But this program is obviously just starting. And can you talk to us about where you see it going?
Yeah. So our first packet of cases, which we've discussed in the past, was against some of the major tech companies. And they were hailing some of their AI features and maybe got out just a little bit ahead of their skis on the capabilities of those AI features. You're right. We are just getting started in this area. We've got a next set of cases kind of on the bubble and the next set of cases after that. We're turning our attention now to AI as a key feature that enhances an existing product. And these products, can't say too much, but I will say they're being marketed to vulnerable audiences. And the claims are that there's something about the AI itself that is helping to keep the purchasing consumer even safer when they purchase this product. So be on the lookout, and we will continue to issue AI monitoring cases throughout the year into the spring and beyond.
Right. We'll be looking at those closely. So obviously, law firms, legal departments, all adding AI tools to increase efficiency, bring down costs. Interesting question. Will NAD likely expect compliance with NAD decisions to be faster and perhaps more thorough as those tools are used and adopted for legal uses?
Well, this is a leading question, or a question where I say, why not? So if you have AI capacity in-house doing your compliance work, why not deploy it as well to compliance with NAD decisions? So we absolutely focus on compliance and not just decision making. And so if you can report back to us that you have deployed a new tool that can dig into the advertising claims and make sure that they meet with the recommendations of our decisions, I say, go for it.
All right. Well, let's dive into influencers a little bit. I know we've got a whole panel this afternoon, so we're talking about this a lot at this conference, as we always do. But NAD has brought a number of cases this year, and some of them were monitoring, but some of them were challenger cases as well, that looked at practices that the FTC has talked about in those testimonial and endorsement guides and maybe sent some warning letters about, but haven't brought cases on. I mean, and these are things like there be disclosure in audio and in the video if the content is video-based. And they've even gotten really granular, things like, hashtag brand, capital partner, and separation between other hashtags and the material connection disclosure. Why this focus, and do we expect to see it continuing? And just talk to us a little bit about how NAD is thinking about influencer practices.
Well, I will say some of the things that might surprise you as marketers, we take as axiomatic. And so you heard the commissioner talk about how context-specific particular influencer ads might be.
Mm-hmm.
And so I know it might give cold comfort to say, you have to always have disclosures here and there. But in each case, we're taking a look at what the target audience is likely to understand. And we're applying the same standards that the Federal Trade Commission is applying. Now, we're applying them in different contexts, in part, as I said, because cases come to us, and we have had a number of challenges this year, a portion of which involve influencer marketing, maybe not as the mainstay of the case, but certainly as one of the claims that we're looking at. And so we're digging in to each ad and determining whether a reasonable consumer who is in that target audience is likely to understand or not understand the connection and the relationship between the influencer and the advertiser.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, we're looking at whether a substantial minority is likely to not understand or to be misled. We're not just talking about a single consumer, but we are digging in. So I'm not sure I'm answering your question.
No, I think
100%, Amy, where you're like, why? And the answer is because we are looking at particular ads. Now, other of the cases are monitoring cases, and those are cases we bring in our own name. And in part, we're a gap filler. I mean, if you all in the audience can go back and take a look at some of our influencer cases from earlier this year, they involve big names, big influencers, big brands, and they make very clear, articulated guidelines for everybody about what might or might not be misleading in this area.
And I thank you. I think we should thank you for that. I mean, you've given some other cases of evolving programs like the TikTok Shop affiliates and things like that, that reading NAD cases helps you get ahead of where enforcement might be going. Yeah. So that's good self-regulation.
Yeah, I always thought those lucky at the FTC. We could avoid the hard issues, but you guys have no choice but to address them. Really interesting that NAD invested in some consumer research this year and how consumers understand influencer campaigns. And it's, of course, launching an influencer certification program. So where does that stand, and what can you tell us about that?
Well, this is a good preview for an afternoon session. My colleague Jennifer Santos from BBB National Programs will be talking about our Institute for Responsible Influence, or IRI. We are deep into developing it, and we'll be launching a certification and training for influencers at some point this spring. And really, this is meeting the demand of the marketplace. I mean, as you heard, as you know, influencer marketing is not going away. It is becoming more and more a component of a brand's overall structure. And these questions about what consumers understand and what an influencer is explaining to them or not explaining to them, they persist. And so we're really trying to meet a need here and get influencers up to speed.
One question we did not ask about was when we would get the updated green guides. So while we wait, and goodness knows how long we're going to wait, the NAD has remained really active in this space. I think last year and the last couple of years, you have focused monitoring resources on looking at corporate sustainability claims. I think you kind of moved beyond that. And this year we've seen a number of interesting competitor challenges. And, when cases raise issues that the green guides haven't addressed, like how do you approach these things?
Well, so while we wait for the green guides, green claims wait for no one. And so again, we are seeing
They're growing. Yeah.
We're seeing a number of challenges in this area. So we go back to first principles. And some issues are either directly addressed in the green guides, but more likely either only alluded to in the green guides or really not encompassed within them. And so we look at the claims and we match them up with the advertiser's substantiation. We have two cases, a number of green cases this year, but two are somewhat recent. And many in the room, you might have seen our case involving caraway and non-toxic cookware. There were really aggressive claims being made for the emission of forever chemicals during the ordinary course of use of traditional nonstick cookware. And the advertiser there, Caraway, was comparing its own product, which is a ceramic-covered nonstick pan, to traditional cookware. And when an advertiser talks about the propensities of its own product, that's one thing. But when you start talking about the competitors' products in a disparaging way, in a highly competitive way, we're really going to dig into whether the science matches up. And there we found it did not. Just this week, we issued a case involving toilet paper.
We love it when you give us a drop for NA. Thank you.
So I don't know if everyone in the room has seen our case, Plant Paper. It is a bamboo-based, very soft toilet paper product. And their marketing was quite aggressive, relating to traditional white, soft, fluffy stuff, and whether the traditional toilet paper causes pretty significant health concerns and environmental concerns. And
Toilet paper.
Toilet paper.
Okay. All right.
And so, again, I hope those of you who've had an experience with the NAD know that we dig in deeply and we read the science and we look at what the substantiation is that an advertiser possesses, whether the challenger has substantiation or a response that can overcome the advertiser's claims. Take a look at this case. Because
Well, you still take a really hard line, though, at disparagement and false disparagement that might be different from monadic product claims.
you know, this case is actually very interesting because, again, in our discussion, we said that the advertiser can talk about its own product. I mean, it is made from harvested bamboo, which has positive impacts on the environment. But when you're talking about a competitor's products, and in this case, an entire line
Yeah.
of competing products, it's very, very challenging to make positive, comparative environmental benefits claims against an entire line.
For decades, the FTC has had a really strong MUSA program with warning letters. There was warning letters the FTC sent recently this year to several large retailers telling them to sort of start policing their reseller claims. So is that an area where NAD might step in order to encourage platforms to police and enforce against its sellers in the MUSA area?
So interestingly, most of our Made in USA cases are challenges that are brought to us. So I don't see us stepping in outside of the context of a challenge necessarily. And the Made in USA cases kind of keep on rolling towards us. And so we'll take a look, certainly, at the chains in which particular product is being marketed. And if we determine that particular claims need to be modified or need to be taken down, we do have this referral relationship to the platforms that I mentioned earlier.
Okay. And this is a big one. I know we've only got a few minutes left, but there is a pending lawsuit against the FTC filed by Clear that challenges the FTC's longstanding competent and reliable scientific evidence standard. And of course, NAD enforces that standard in its cases and has been pretty consistent in using the FTC's health guidance document as a roadmap. And we've seen a huge uptick this year at the NAD in dietary supplement cases. If this FTC loosens up a bit or backs away from its competent and reliable scientific evidence standard, or if a court might require that, what are you going to do at NAD as far as your body of precedent and looking at performance in health-based cases?
Well, Daniel, I'm lucky as well to go back to what I call first principles, because there is a litigated case from many, many decades ago that has set forth factors. These are the Pfizer factors. Those attorneys in the room know this, and I can see some heads shaking. And what we would look at is what type of evidence experts in the field would require to support a particular claim. So we don't have to rely necessarily on guidance documents or articulations by the Federal Trade Commission when we can go back to what the basic standards are and have always been.
Yes. Phyllis, another trend at the NAD you mentioned have been challenges brought by pharmaceutical companies against marketers of prescription drugs, sometime in parallel with actions taken by the FDA. Can you tell us how NAD is viewing those cases and what standards we can expect to be applied?
Well, it's a very interesting environment to be in right now because the FDA has taken quite a bit of public action involving pharmaceutical companies, while at the same time, as I said earlier, pharmaceutical companies are appearing before the NAD involving challenges that may overlap with some of the FDA action. We're good at our jobs and we dig in and we understand the science, and it doesn't get more sciencey than a pharmaceutical case. And so again, applying the same principles to the claims at issue. So, stay tuned on that. And I hope you guys all have subscriptions to our online archive and you're following us, not just at the press release level, but if you really want to dig in and see how we dig in, come and read our cases and you can see what I'm talking about.
I was going to ask you for closing remarks. Was that your PSA or do you have any other parting thoughts that you'd like to share with the finest lawyers in the country supporting the best brands in the world?
Oh my gosh, Amy, that was very well done. Well, this is my first ANA on this side of the stage in this position. Although I've been at the ANA for many, many years. I want to thank all of you for a really warm welcome when you and your brands have appeared before us. I believe strongly that what we're offering is a tremendous model, replicated internationally, and of such high value to your brands, to the economic health of your companies. And what we do is level the playing field so brands can continue to compete fairly in the marketplace. And so come find me at the break, introduce yourselves. I will be circulating around.
Yeah, yes, thank you. Phyllis will be, and we invite, there's other members of the BBB National Programs, Eric Grayson, we've got Eric Eunice, who runs the SWIFT program, of course, Jennifer Santos here. Thank you so much. And that wraps another Ad Nauseam.
Thank you.
Thank you, panelists, for an insightful discussion. If you have any questions for our panelists, their contact information is in the show notes. For more information on the latest developments in ad law, visit our Adventures in Law blog at www.adventures-in-law.com. And check out all Ad Nauseam episodes by subscribing to Baker Hosts wherever you get your podcasts. As always, thanks for listening to Baker Hosts. Comments heard on Baker Hosts are for informational purposes and should not be construed as legal advice regarding any specific facts or circumstances. Listeners should not act upon the information provided on Baker Hosts without first consulting with a lawyer directly. The opinions expressed on Baker Hosts are those of participants appearing on the program and do not necessarily reflect those of the firm. For more information about our practices and experience, please visit bakerlaw.com.